Hey, welcome to HOA Karen Cases.
I thought the lake would be quiet, just wood, water, and time to settle in. Then the notice appeared, zip-tied to my own gate, telling me access required permission. She stood above me the next morning, clipboard in hand, speaking like the shoreline had always belonged to her. After that, they started watching. Not openly, just cameras, phones, presence without words. So I went where paper lives. County ink doesn't speculate. It defines. 4 docks, 1 parcel, unbroken lines. At the pavilion, I didn't argue. I set the map down. And for the first time, her authority had limits. Now the dock is quiet again. No signs, no locks, just water. And the line, exactly where it's always been. The gravel shifted under my tires as I turned down the final slope, a narrow stretch that wound through pines like it hadn't been maintained in years. It hadn't. My uncle used to say the road was half the defense. If you couldn't make it down, you didn't belong at the lake. I reached the clearing just before dusk. The house sat where I left it 12 years ago. Low-sloped roof, cedar siding dulled to a silvery gray. Stone chimney listing slightly eastward. The porch sagged at one corner. A wind chime rang softly from under the eaves, rusted in place. When I opened the driver's side door, the air hit me. Pine, water, damp earth, and something else. Stillness. The kind that settles into forgotten places. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The key stuck, just for a second. The hinges groaned like they remembered me. Inside, the air was stale and brittle. Curtains hung, yellowed by sun and time. The furniture was all still there. Uncle's recliner, the little oak table with the cracked leg, the wood-burning stove crusted with ash no one had swept out. I didn't say anything. Just opened every window I could. Let the lake breeze in. There were no animals, no mold. It's just time, settled like dust on every surface. In the kitchen, I ran my hand over the counter, found an old tin coffee can, unopened, expired 10 years ago. I smiled without meaning to. On the mantel was the photo I remembered most, my uncle, arms crossed, standing at the edge of the dock, summer light behind him. I turned it down gently. I wasn't ready to see his face. From the window, I could just catch the water, glinting through trees that had grown taller in his absence. The shoreline shimmered, still familiar, but not the same. I stepped out the back door and followed the slope down to the lake, taking it slow. The path was narrow but clear. My boots sank a little into the soft ground where years of runoff had pooled. Patches of grass were flattened like something or someone had been walking through recently. At the bottom, I paused. The dock was still there, long, straight, weathered silver, a little tilted at the end, but holding. The gate I remembered, iron frame, wood slats, a simple padlock, was intact. I let my hand rest on the top rail, but the lake itself, that had changed. New docks lined the cove. Most were freshly built, composite decking, solar lighting, motion sensors mounted along the beams. One had a rope ladder for paddleboards. Another, a sign in blue and white. Lot 12, HOA use only. I counted 5 piers that didn't exist the last time I was here. Some extended further than they should. One angled into what I knew had once been part of my uncle's lot line. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. It wasn't the lake I remembered. It was something organized now, managed, overseen. I walked to the gate and stopped. A laminated notice was zip-tied to the slats, centered, deliberate. HOA access required, remove lock or face fines. In bold beneath that, Community Shoreline Policy 3.4, Shared Use Zone. Failure to comply may result in enforcement action. No signature, no contact number, just a seal at the bottom, Ridgewater Lakeside, HOA. I didn't tear it down. I just stood there reading it 3 times. There was no HOA when I inherited the property. I never signed anything, never attended a meeting. No one ever contacted me. But here it was, in plastic, cable tied to my gate like they'd always had a say. I glanced around. No one on the trail. No sound except water tapping softly at the rocks. I folded the notice, slipped it into my back pocket, and walked back toward the house. From the porch, I could see across the lake to the opposite shore. When I was a boy, most of those houses were seasonal, windows boarded, driveways grown over come October. Now, they all had motion lights, fences, yard decor arranged by theme, nautical flags, Adirondack chairs, fake barrels. Not a cabin among them. Someone stood on a second-floor balcony. I couldn't make out the face, but they held binoculars. The lens caught the light, glinted, then turned away. I stepped back inside, closed the screen door. That night, I sat on the porch with the lights off, and a cup of old coffee reheated on the stove. The moon cast a dull glow across the lake. The water moved slow, steady like it always had, but something beneath it was different. I replayed the walk, the new docks, the laminated sign, the silence of neighbors I hadn't seen yet. I hadn't told anyone I was coming back. No notice, no schedule. Just showed up with a truck and a house key. And still, within what I now realized must have been days, someone had placed that warning. HOA, access required, for my dock. The lock hadn't been touched, but someone had tried the gate. Someone had measured it, claimed it, left paper to justify it. I turned the sign over in my hands again. The wording wasn't vague. It was bold, final. It assumed authority, assumed ownership. But I hadn't agreed to anything. Hadn't signed a thing. I looked down the slope, past the trees, toward the lake I thought I still knew. If they thought I'd fold quietly, they didn't know who they were dealing with. But first, I needed to be sure. I needed to understand exactly what I'd inherited and what I was still standing on. Because if I didn't, someone else would take it, and they'd already started. The lake was quiet that morning, overcast, but calm. A light wind skimmed the water, brushing ripples against the dock legs. I was crouched near the end of the walkway, checking the anchor bolts along the joists. Most were still sound, though a few had rusted to the point of concern. I'd need to reinforce the corner railing if I planned to use the dock before fall storms. I heard the crunch of gravel before I saw anyone. Boots, not tires. Slow, deliberate steps. I looked up from the waterline and saw her, Karen, standing at the top of the slope like she owned the view, clipboard in hand, no expression. 3 others stood behind her, 2 men in matching polo shirts and a woman in running gear. They didn't wave, didn't introduce themselves, just waited. Karen's voice carried clean across the space between us. "We need to talk about your access restrictions." She said it like I was behind on a water bill, like this wasn't my land. I stood slowly, wiping lake grit off my palms. I didn't move closer, didn't invite them down. Karen didn't move either. She just held the clipboard higher, thumb resting on the top edge, like it held the weight of law. The others didn't speak, just watched. "You're currently in violation of shoreline policy," she added. "Community access to the water cannot be restricted. Your gate is locked." There was no warmth, no curiosity, just intent. I nodded once, slow. "That dock's been locked for 20 years, I said. "Long before there was any policy." Her lips tightened. "Access rights were voted in by majority in 2017. It applies to all lots within the Ridgewater Lakeside HOA. I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure what to say yet. So I waited. Karen stepped forward, just far enough to put pressure on the moment. She didn't come down the slope, just hovered there, deliberate, patient. I walked up to meet her, but stopped at the dock gate, kept it shut, rested my hand on the top rail, fingers loose. "Like I said," I told her, "the dock's been locked since before any HOA formed. This land, this house, has been in my family since 1973. Nobody's ever had access but us." Karen glanced over my shoulder at the dock behind me, then down to her clipboard. "Ownership doesn't exempt you from community. Governance," she said. "You're part of Ridgewater now. All shoreline parcels fall under shared use, as designated by board resolution." She said resolution like it was statute, like something I should have voted on, but didn't. "I never joined," I said. "I never signed anything. No agreement, no opt-in." "Participation is automatic," she replied, flipping a page. "It's in the bylaws, recorded with the county under our charter." She didn't offer to show me that page. I didn't ask. Karen pulled a stapled document from the folder, held it out between 2 fingers. "This is your formal notice," she said. "Violation of Section 3.4, obstruction of shared shoreline assets." I didn't take it. She continued anyway. "We're recommending a corrective action period of 7 days. After that, You'll be subject to daily fines of $50, doubling each week until resolved. She smiled when she said it. Not wide, just enough, to show she'd practiced that line before. The two men flanking her adjusted their footing. One looked down at his watch. The woman behind Karen glanced over at the trees, bored. Still, no one else spoke. "I'm not signing anything today," I said. Karen tilted her head, mildly amused. "You'll need to attend a compliance review next Thursday, 7:30 p.m., Pavilion Hall. We can walk you through the policies then." She paused, letting the moment hang. "Friendly escalation," she added, voice flat. I took the paper then, not because I accepted it, because I needed to see what they thought they had. "I'll need to review the deed," I said. Karen's eyes didn't flicker, but her brow lifted, just slightly. A twitch of recognition that I'd said something inconvenient. "You do that," she replied, turning. "Bring whatever you have to the meeting." The others followed her without a word. They turned as one, moving back up the hill with practiced ease, as if they did this often. I stayed where I was, holding the form loosely in one hand, watching their backs. I didn't yell, didn't argue, that wasn't the play, I just watched. Karen never looked back. As they reached the tree line, one of the men glanced out across the water. He pointed toward the far side of the cove. There was another dock, older, with a matching lock and gate, same iron frame, same faded wood slats. "Same lock, same fencing," he said quietly. Karen didn't respond. She didn't even turn her head, just kept walking. But I heard it, and I remembered that dock. It used to belong to the Daltons, retired school teachers who spent summers fishing, always kept to themselves. Their place had been vacant for a few years now. I wasn't sure who owned it anymore. I looked at the paper in my hand. There were no signatures, just checkboxes. A printed seal at the bottom. No instruction for appeal, just threats written in policy. Language. Back inside, I spread the notice on the kitchen table beside the folded HOA letter from the dock gate. 2 messages, 2 warnings. Neither of them backed by anything I'd agreed to, but they were acting like I had. And now I saw it. This wasn't just about my gate. This was method, pattern, control claimed incrementally, one shoreline at a time. The morning after the visit, I woke early. Couldn't shake the weight of that clipboard. Karen's voice still lodged in my head like a splinter. Participation is automatic. If that was true, if they could simply write me into a system I never agreed to, then my only defense would be in writing older than theirs. The kind you can't edit, vote on, or bury under policy language. I made coffee in a dented percolator and set it on the stove. No internet here, no digital shortcuts, just dust, paper, and memory. So, I began digging. The main hallway still smelled faintly of varnish and smoke. My uncle hadn't been organized in the way most people are, but he'd kept things, folders tucked into boxes, maps rolled into tubes, envelopes labeled in shaky capital letters. The file cabinet in the living room was mostly fishing licenses, bait receipts, and expired boat tags. A manila folder labeled tax held 20 years of handwritten mileage logs for trips to town. Nothing useful. I pulled old cigar boxes from under the bed, scanned through storage bins in the mudroom. Maps, yes, but hand-drawn ones. Lake depth guides, old fishing routes, a few sketches with X's marked for pickerel beds. But no deed, no survey, no official boundaries. I found a folder labeled camping permits that had more bureaucratic value than anything tied to land. The frustration was slow but steady, like the lake wind. Not enough to make you move, just enough to keep you cold. I paused, tried to remember the layout. He never used the kitchen drawers for paperwork, but there was one cabinet, under the sink, right side. The wood was warped, and I'd always remembered the drawer sticking. I went to it. It took a pocket knife to pry open. Behind some old caulking tubes and a spare stove filter, I found a sealed envelope, thick, yellowed, tied shut with brittle red string. In faded black ink across the front, Dock Survey, 1989. My chest tightened, not from nerves, but from something deeper. Recognition. Proof. I walked it to the dining table and laid it flat. Untied the string. The paper inside was fragile, browned at the edges. Not brittle, but close. No map, just a typed letter. I read it once, then again. April 12th, 1989. 2. Mr. William R. McKay. Parcel. Reference number 487-L Ridgewater. Township. Per your request, we have completed the riparian parcel survey and dock assessment for your shoreline segment of Ridgewater Lake, as detailed in field record number C-1287. Your deeded parcel includes sole ownership of the upland shoreline and exclusive access rights to Dock A, Dock B, Dock C, and Dock D as installed on file with the county. Please note, this access is not contingent on shared use agreements and predates any subdivision charter. The survey has been recorded with Ridgewater County and may be referenced by property ID. Respectfully, Gerald K. Langley, Registered Land Surveyor, license number 24397. That was it. No map, no coordinates, no diagrams to hold up and wave in a meeting. But this wasn't nothing. It confirmed the structure. Confirmed that at least 4 docks were deeded under one parcel. My parcel. And more importantly, it stated clearly that access was not subject to shared use. Not then, not now. I flipped the envelope inside out, felt along the seams. If there had been a map, it was either removed or never included. Maybe Langley had planned to send it later. Maybe my uncle had filed it separately. Maybe it had been, borrowed and never returned. But without it, the letter alone was just a whisper, suggestive but not definitive. I needed the survey file itself. I folded the letter carefully, slid it into a plastic sleeve, and placed it in a binder. I labeled the tab, Dock Ownership, Primary Evidence. Then I stared at the empty chair across from me and muttered, "Where'd you put the damn map, Bill?" No answer, just the creak of the window frame and the sound of wind brushing pine needles outside. That evening, I stepped outside as the sun burned low through the clouds. The water was flat and gold-tinted. A heron stalked near the far reeds. My dock stretched into silence, my dock. But without that map, the words on paper felt fragile, like something the HOA could dispute, dismiss, or override with community consensus. I knew what was coming, the compliance meeting, the questions, the pressure. Karen wouldn't back off because I had a letter from 1989. She'd want a line in ink, a shape on a map, something filed with a county seal. And maybe she had her own map, one filed after mine, one resurveyed, redrawn, and declared policy by vote. But this was still my land, and if I was going to fight for it, I'd need more than memory and suspicion. I'd need every record the county still had. The mail hadn't come yet when the SUV rolled up, white, unmarked, no dealer plate, no community decal, just clean paint and tinted glass. It stopped at the base of the driveway. The driver never turned off the engine. A young man stepped out wearing khakis and a pullover embroidered with property compliance in gray-on-gray thread, so faint it might have been invisible by design. He didn't speak, just walked up, handed me a sealed envelope, and turned back without eye contact. Didn't wait for a signature, didn't confirm delivery. He was gone before I opened it. Inside, a formal violation notice from Ridgewater Lakeside, HOA, dated and initialed in the margin. The language was cold. Obstruction of shared shoreline assets. You are in violation of Community Covenant 3.4. Access gate remains locked and impedes residents' lawful enjoyment of communal lake features. Beneath it, a fine schedule, $50 per day, beginning the date of notice. Doubled weekly until compliance referred to legal counsel after 21 days. Attached were 2 glossy printouts, photos of my dock gate, time-stamped. One in morning light, one at dusk. They'd been watching. I traced the outline of the gate in the image. The lock was clear. The fence panel behind it, wooden, weathered, looked older than any document they were quoting. The notice closed with a printed name, Karen L., board president. No phone number, no direct line, just pressure. I didn't respond, not yet. That evening, I walked the slope down with bolt cutters in hand, not to give in, not to submit, just to see what happened. The padlock had rusted from inside. Took 2 cuts to snap it clean. I propped the gate open with a cinder block. Quiet, deliberate. Then I waited. Nothing happened that night. No voices, no cars. But the next morning, I found fresh boot prints across the dock, larger than mine, with deep heel marks from someone moving with purpose. They hadn't lingered, just crossed it, occupied it, like they'd never been locked out. I installed a trail camera under the side rail behind a rusted bracket, motion activated, time-stamped, angled toward the entryway. It recorded to a hidden card and sent backups to an old cloud account I reactivated that morning. If someone was going to use what was mine, I wanted to see their face. I drove into town the next day and parked 2 blocks from the courthouse. Daniel Shore's office sat above a long, closed hardware store. No sign out front. Just a nameplate on the mailbox and a paper taped to the door. Appointments by knock or necessity. Inside, it smelled like glue and paper. The floorboards creaked. Daniel was in his 60s. Wireframe glasses, checkered shirt, silver hair cut short. He looked like someone who'd fought enough small-town wars to know when not to pick one. He sat behind a desk stacked with maps and yellow legal pads. Behind him, wall-mounted shelves sagged under binders, labeled by township and lake. I handed him the violation. He read it silently. When he reached the fine schedule, he exhaled once, low and slow. "This isn't enforcement," he said. "This is pressure." Daniel flipped through the pages again, slower this time. "Look at this phrasing. Community-controlled zones, evolving access policy, adaptive charter language. That's how they operate. They don't start with seizure, they start with presence. Then they normalize." He set the folder down, leaned back. "If they can, get you to unlock the gate, just once. They'll use it as implied consent. Doesn't matter what you signed or didn't. They're building precedent with your silence." He didn't say I'd already opened the gate, but he didn't need to. You need records, surveys, deeds, boundary filings. If they predate the HOA charter, you've got a foundation, but you'll have to act fast and quiet. The longer they write history around you, the harder it is to unwind. I asked if he'd represent me. He didn't answer right away. Just looked at the paperwork again, then said, "I'm retired, but I'll help where I can." Which, in this place, meant more than most contracts. That night, I made a pot of black coffee and sat on the porch in a weathered chair. The trail camera had blinked red earlier, motion detected. At 10:47 p.m., 2 figures walked down from the far trail. No lights, no hesitation. They crossed through the open gate and stopped at the end of the dock. One of them pulled out a phone and took a slow, sweeping video. Neither spoke. They didn't fish, didn't sit. They stood there like surveyors, like auditors. Then they turned and left. Didn't look up toward the porch, didn't need to. I watched them the whole time. Back inside, I laid the violation notice flat on the kitchen table, then placed the surveyor's letter beside it. 2 documents, 2 claims, one written in history, one typed in policy. I took photographs of both, scanned them into digital folders, backed them up twice. Karen was building her case with assumptions. I'd build mine with records. This wasn't about one dock or one gate. It was about a slow erasure, one that only worked if nobody stood still long enough to notice. I wasn't moving, not anymore. The lake looked calm that morning, still, glassy, and indifferent. But I wasn't. After the fines, the threats, and the quiet visitors on my dock, I stopped waiting. The paper trail wasn't enough anymore. I needed voices, witnesses. Someone who remembered what came before Karen rewrote the rules. So, I started walking. The green cabin 2 lots down hadn't changed much since I was a teenager. Same chipped paint, same rickety porch swing swaying even without wind. A set of solar panels now lined the roof, but otherwise it felt untouched. I knocked twice, waited. A man in his 60s opened the door, still in a flannel shirt, one hand gripping the inside edge of the door frame. "Morning," I offered. "I'm just trying to get a sense of the shoreline situation. You've been here a while?" He nodded, but didn't smile. "I don't get involved in board matters," he said flatly. I explained I'd inherited the McKay property, that the HOA had started claiming access to my dock. I didn't accuse anyone. I just asked if he'd ever had to deal with the same. His mouth tightened. He looked past me, scanning the tree line like he expected someone to be listening. "Just follow the rules," he said. "Makes life easier." And then he closed the door. I stood there a moment, longer than I should have. Not angry, not surprised, just disappointed. At the edge of the far bend sat the only dock older than mine, tilted, patched with mismatched boards and rope bindings. That was Walter's place. I remembered him from summers decades ago. He rarely spoke to anyone unless they spoke first. He fished from sunrise to lunch, then disappeared indoors until dusk. I found him seated on a plastic chair at the dock's end, a faded army cap pulled low over his eyes. I approached slowly, not trying to sneak, but not loud either. "Afternoon, Walter." He didn't turn. "Figured you'd come." I stopped beside him, gave him space. After a moment, he nodded toward the water. "Mine was the first they took," he said. "Karen?" He nodded once. Said I didn't have the paperwork. Told me the survey lines had changed. I knew better. But I was tired. Figured if they wanted it that bad, maybe they needed it more than me. I stayed quiet. "Next summer," he said, "they started renting it out. Slip number 3, they called it. Had a family from the city park their boat there for 3 months. Why didn't you fight it?" He looked at me then, eyes dull but steady. "Didn't see the point. I don't fish as much anymore." I watched the water with him. 5 full minutes passed in silence. "You still have your deed?" I asked. "Nope. Burned most of that paperwork after my wife died." "I'm not letting them take mine." He nodded again. "Then don't wait. They're counting on that." The next house I visited sat halfway up the hill, modest, well kept. A mother in her 30s answered the door, one child peeking from behind her knee. 2 kayaks leaned on a rack beside the porch. I introduced myself, explained what I was facing. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her. "I rebuilt my dock 2 years ago," she said quietly. "Karen said I had to use board-approved materials. Said the old one was a liability risk." "Did she have the authority?" She shrugged. "I didn't ask, just wanted to get on the water." She walked over to a patio box and pulled out a binder, an HOA packet. Inside was a printed map. When I looked closer, I saw it. The boundary lines. My lot, and others, were labeled differently than in the original plat I'd found at the county, broader, blurred. "They said this was the new survey," she said, "but nobody ever saw them do it." I pointed to the section where her dock sat. "This says shared access. You knew that?" She looked down. Didn't read the fine print. By the end of the day, I'd spoken to 5 property owners. Every one of them told a version of the same story. Quiet updates, changed maps, new policies announced in newsletters they barely read. What I'd assumed was a single violation was something else entirely. It was a pattern. I returned home and spread a sheet of butcher paper across the kitchen table. Began sketching the cove by hand, lot by lot, dock by dock. Who built it? Who claimed it? Who thought they still owned it? Some docks were now labeled HOA rental. Others were simply labeled shared. I wrote in red the names of those who had paperwork. In gray, the ones who weren't sure. In black, the ones Karen had already erased. She hadn't just enforced rules, she'd rewritten geography. And most of them hadn't even noticed. At the general store that evening, I brought it up casually at checkout. Just asked if dock lines had shifted in the last few years. The cashier, a middle-aged man with a wedding ring and a bored expression, paused while scanning. Then he looked at me, just for a second too long. "Careful what you stir out here," he said quietly. I didn't respond, just took my receipt and left. But I felt it then. The chill beneath the surface. The quiet pressure. It wasn't about the dues or the meetings. It was about control, and Karen had perfected it. Back at the house, I cleared the wall beside the fireplace, tacked up the hand-drawn map, lined it with names, red string linking conflicts. Next to it, the violation notice, the letter from the surveyor, the photo of my locked gate, the timestamp from the trail camera. I printed my emails with Daniel, marked up HOA newsletters from the last 3 years. Anything that hinted at dock policy changes, anything Karen had put in writing. I wasn't just collecting proof. I was building a record, one they couldn't ignore. And somewhere in their archives, I knew it existed. The real map. The one they didn't want me to find. And I would. Even if I had to walk every inch of this lake to do it. It took 3 tries to get a parking spot near the county recorder's office. The rest of town was quiet, but this building, tall brick, cold windows, seemed to draw a constant trickle of realtors, surveyors, and debt collectors. The inside was colder than I remembered. Fluorescent lights hummed from the ceiling like distant bees. A single desk sat beneath the record sign. A bell on the counter and a jar of pens with no ink. The clerk looked up as I approached. mid-40s, brown cardigan, tired eyes. She didn't ask what I wanted, just waited. "I'm looking for a plat map," I said. "Original parcel filings, Ridgewater Lake, 1980s, McKay family lot." She nodded once, didn't smile, just stood and disappeared into a back room behind a narrow swinging door. I waited in silence. 5 minutes passed, then 10. When she returned, she carried a thick-bound ledger. The leather cover was cracked. The binding looked like it had been repaired more than once. She set it down in front of me and slid over a pair of cotton gloves. "Be careful," she said. The weight of the book was physical. I opened it with both hands. Pages yellowed, ink faded, but legible. Each parcel drawn with a surveyor's precision, measurements in chains and feet, annotations in tight script. Some were crossed out, replaced by newer filings. Others were clean, untouched. I flipped slowly, scanning for my uncle's name, Parcel 487L. It took 10 pages. Then there it was. Unmistakable, hand-labeled boundaries, a bold signature in the corner, parcel identifier inked clearly at the top, W.R. McKay, and below that, 4 thin rectangles reaching into the water, each labeled Dock A, Dock B, Dock C, Dock D. I leaned in closer. The shoreline was marked with a dotted boundary labeled Private Riparian Access, Non-Common. The entire segment, nearly 150 feet, was designated as exclusive to the parcel. The docks weren't clustered. They were spaced precisely apart, each stemming from the same line of ownership. There were no easements, no overlays, just ink, surveyor's stamps. Notary marks dated 1986 and filed with Ridgewater County. Exactly what the letter from Langley had referenced. I ran my gloved finger gently along the edge of the boundary line, a physical link to a claim that had stood for nearly 40 years, quiet, uninterrupted, until Karen decided to act like it didn't matter. These docks weren't shared, they were deeded, and as of this moment, they still were. Folded into the back of the same folder was a separate page, smaller, handwritten, clipped to a planning sheet from a now-defunct commission. It read, "Ridgewater Parcel 487L retains exclusive riparian privileges as granted by pre-charter deed. Access is non-derivative. No reassignment or collective reassessment may override established boundaries without notarized release by deed holder." It was signed in 1992, a year after the first whispers of HOA formation began in the county. Register. I reread that line, "Access is non-derivative," twice. It meant exactly what I thought it meant. The HOA could pass all the policies they wanted. They could vote, draft rules, host meetings. But none of that gave them the legal right to touch my shoreline. They were betting I didn't know that, or wouldn't check. I flagged the pages. The clerk returned with a portable scanner, an old one that buzzed loudly with every pass. She stood beside me, watching the screen as it saved the documents. "Most people don't come looking for this stuff," she said quietly. "Why not?" I asked. She shrugged. "They think what's current is what's right. They forget this office is where everything starts." When the scans were complete, she printed 4 certified copies, stamped each page, and slid them into a stiff envelope. "This won't be popular," she said. Her voice wasn't judgmental, just tired, like someone who'd seen this cycle before. I paused. "Has anyone else come looking for these?" She shook her head. "No, that's how it works. They make you feel like the rules were always there." I thanked her and stepped back out into the afternoon light, the envelope tucked tight under my arm. Back home, I cleared the table and laid the documents flat. The county plat, the dock layout, the handwritten notation about non-derivative access. My living room looked less like a house and more like a war room. Outside, the trees shifted with a dry wind. I walked down to the shoreline. The water was still. I scanned the cove again, this time not as a resident, but as an owner. Dock A, mine. Dock B, mine. Dock C, mine. Dock D, mine. The same docks Karen had marked community slips in the HOA newsletter last year. I thought about Walter's dock, the kayaks stacked beside that mother's porch, the man who told me to just follow the rules. They hadn't lost their property. It had been, as quietly taken, because someone redrew the lines. I stepped onto the first dock, the one my uncle built himself in 1974. The pilings were sun-bleached, the hardware rusted, but the frame held. Near the base, I found his initials carved into the wood. WRM, July '86. I crouched beside it, rested my hand on the piling. "You didn't build this to be taken," I whispered. He hadn't. He'd measured every board, paid for the permits, filed the surveys, and it wasn't going to end like this. Not with cable-tied notices, not with soft threats and hard envelopes, not with silence mistaken for surrender. I stood, the paper still warm from the copier under my arm, and stared out across the lake. Karen wanted to turn this shoreline into policy, but I had proof, and I was done waiting. The flyer was taped to my gate with blue painter's tape. No envelope, no postage, just bold black text, special session, compliance review, Friday 6 p.m., pavilion. Hall, all residents encouraged to attend. Below it, in smaller type, subject to compliance verification. There was no signature, but it didn't need one. The print style, the phrasing, it was Karen's. I arrived 10 minutes early. The lot outside the community center was already full. SUVs lined along the tree line, conversations echoing in soft clusters near the door. I didn't recognize most of the faces, and none of them looked in my direction. The building was bright inside, humming with fluorescent light and murmured voices. I stepped toward the entrance, but just as I reached for the door handle, a man stepped forward and blocked it with his arm. Mid-30s, polo shirt. HOA logo, stitched faintly above the breast pocket. "Sorry," he said. "Closed session." "I own lot 487, I replied. "That dock, non-compliant owners aren't permitted during board review." I stared at him, calm, quiet. "There's nothing in the charter that allows you to block me from my own hearing." He didn't respond. Behind him, I saw her, Karen, standing at the back of the hallway, arms crossed, clipboard tucked under one elbow. She said nothing, just watched. I didn't raise my voice, didn't make a scene. I turned and walked back to my truck, because this wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a setup. 2 days later, I came back from a trip into town, groceries in the passenger seat, wind through the open window. I pulled into the driveway and froze. A new post stood at the base of my slope, right at the edge of my dock, metal, powder-coated, bolted directly into the exposed bedrock. The sign read, HOA Shoreline, authorized use only. No date, no explanation, no warning. The seal at the bottom matched the letterhead from the violation notice. Karen hadn't knocked. She didn't need to. I didn't rip it out. That's what they wanted. Damage, destruction, something they could escalate. Instead, I documented it. Photographed the bolts, the placement, the angles, even the drill holes in the rock. Then I removed it slowly, carefully. The post was deeper than I expected, set with concrete, meant to last. I set it against the porch and wrote one note, handwritten, taped to the metal, unauthorized install, private parcel. That night, around 11:30, I heard gravel shift at the edge of the drive. Then again, 20 minutes later. A car rolled past slowly. No headlights. I didn't go outside. Didn't need to. The next morning, another envelope arrived. Not taped, delivered. Official letterhead this time. From the Ridgewater Township Clerk's Office. Inside, a citation. Violation, willful destruction of community infrastructure. Filed by Ridgewater Lakeside. HOA, co-signed Karen L. Board. President hearing, municipal review. Pending attached was a copy of the photograph. My hand on the metal post, mid-removal, cropped, no context. The implication was clear. I had interfered with HOA property. Never mind that the property wasn't theirs. Never mind that no notice was given. This wasn't enforcement anymore. This was a campaign. Procedural war. I drove straight to Daniel Shore's office. Didn't call ahead. He opened the door wearing reading glasses and a scowl, but he waved me in. I handed him the citation, the signed photos, and the deed copy. He read each one slowly, silently. Then he removed his glasses and set them on the desk. This just got real. He leaned back, arms crossed. They're using the system now. Not pressure, not policy, process. Which means they're preparing to fight like they've already won. Can we respond? We will. Daniel drafted a formal response that afternoon. A challenge to the HOA's authority to install signage on deeded property without consent. A request for immediate removal of any posted claims. A demand for retraction of the citation, citing false jurisdiction. He sent it certified mail, and copied the township magistrate. That night, I walked the dock alone. The wind had picked up, brushing steady waves against the pilings. Across the lake, Karen's house glowed, windows lit, shadows moving behind the glass. I could hear laughter, maybe music, a party or a meeting. I couldn't tell. I didn't need to. I stayed on my side of the shoreline, standing exactly where my uncle had stood for decades. The wood creaked beneath me, familiar and unshaken. I looked out across the water, the dark pressing in from all sides. They were pushing, and I wasn't moving. I came back from Daniel's office with more than just a letter. I came back with direction. What Karen had done wasn't just about signage or shoreline enforcement. It was something deeper, institutional, something built on slow, invisible erosion of boundaries, of ownership, of memory. If I was going to dismantle her position, I needed to follow every thread, from the dock pilings to the tax map, from the bylaws to the ledger. So I went back to the beginning. Daniel arranged another session at the county archives. This time, we weren't looking for plats. We were looking for transactions, parcel consolidations, temporary land actions, shoreline stabilizations, anything that touched lot 487 and the docks branching from it. We found it in a 1986 filing under the name W.R. McKay, notarized, logged, and stamped by the township clerk. It was titled Shoreline Consolidation for Riparian Infrastructure, Ridgewater Lake. The language was direct. This action affirms the temporary merger of 4 dock installations under Parcel 487L for the purposes of maintenance and stabilization. This merger shall remain until formally reversed by deed holder or county. But there was no reversal, no follow-up, no withdrawal form. The merger still stood. Legally, my uncle's parcel didn't just border the shoreline. It owned every dock on the east bend of the cove, and until someone filed a legal reversal, those claims held. Every rental, every shared use designation, every HOA access point marked by Karen's board, all of it sat on private infrastructure. Mine. Back at the house, I pulled up the HOA's website on a dusty laptop still logged into my uncle's service provider. I clicked through. Community features, dock lottery program, seasonal rentals. There they were, high-res photos, a list of available slips, rental schedules, shared access. Slip number 2, available May through August. Slip number 4, limited access, reserve now. The piers in the photos were unmistakable. Same railings, same pilings, same knots in the planks I'd repaired with my uncle one summer in '97. They hadn't even bothered to disguise them. Karen's board had been renting out my docks, collecting fees, issuing keys, granting access to strangers, and doing it all under the title of Community Asset Management. I screen recorded everything, saved the pages as PDFs, printed each one, and marked the visual overlaps with red ink. They weren't just using what wasn't theirs. They were profiting from it. I called the number Daniel had circled on a state directory page. Emily Storrs, water rights consultant, license 2021. We met 2 days later at the county Pier office, neutral ground. She arrived in boots and a field jacket, tablet in hand, professional but direct. I laid out everything, county plats, the consolidation filing, the photos, the screen captures from the HOA site. She scrolled through in silence, occasionally nodded, zoomed in on a few of the dock coordinates, then she looked up. If you own the docks, she said, you own riparian control over the shoreline that anchors them. That includes both physical structure and submerged land, unless explicitly relinquished in writing. And if I didn't, I asked, then this would be murky. She tapped the map. But you did. This isn't murky, it's statute. Emily offered to formalize her findings. Within the hour, she drafted a letter, attached the plat references, and signed it under her state certification number. Daniel met us at a notary's office. We stamped the letter, logged the coordinates, made 3 certified copies. When we returned to Daniel's office, he added it to my legal folder, right behind the cease and desist draft. They've built this entire program on informal control, he said. Karen's power depends on assumption. But assumption doesn't outlast paper. He looked at me. You have the paper. That evening, I walked the shoreline again. Not aimlessly this time. I walked with a clipboard, a copy of the map, and a measuring wheel. I traced each dock, dock A through D, checking each one against the records. I noted placement, usage signs, any HOA markers still in place. Some had fresh nails, some had kayak mounts. One had a chain wrapped loosely through the railing, marked Property of Ridgewater HOA. I took it off. The lake moved softly, wind brushing against the surface. But I didn't feel peace. I felt clarity. Karen hadn't claimed my docks because she misunderstood. She'd claimed them because no one stopped her. Until now. Back at the house, I updated the diagram on the wall. Each dock now clearly marked private, consolidated under 487 L HOA listing found evidence logged. I taped Emily's letter to the center of the board, drew lines from her signature to the docks, to the photographs, to the financial trail. The lake hadn't changed, not the water, not the trees, not the structures, but I had. I saw it all now for what it was, an ecosystem of passive theft dressed as policy. They'd been standing on my wood, tying their boats to my pilings, collecting money from my shoreline. That ends now. The sun had dipped low behind the pines, casting long amber lines across the floorboards of the porch. I was halfway through a cup of reheated coffee, boots propped on the railing, when I heard it. Footsteps in the leaves, not boots, not heavy, just the soft tread of someone moving on purpose. I didn't stand, just looked to the edge of the property line, where the tree line thickened before dropping toward the southern edge of the cove. That's where he stepped out. 9.1, a stranger at the property line. Mid-50s, maybe older. Windbreakers zipped to the neck. Faded baseball cap pulled low over a lined face. He didn't step onto the gravel, didn't pass the boundary of the yard, just raised one hand slowly, palm out. Not here to cause trouble, he said, voice low, controlled. Just tired of watching it happen. I nodded once, said nothing. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small black object, walked forward a few steps, just enough to place it on the porch railing, then backed off again. Used to serve on the board, he said. Treasurer for 2 years. He paused, got out before it got dirty. Karen? He nodded, looked back at the trees. This'll help you understand what she's been doing. Then he disappeared into the woods. I didn't ask his name, didn't need to. Inside, I wiped the dust off the thumb drive with the edge of my sleeve, plugged it into the old laptop. One folder appeared. Internal minutes. No password, no encryption, just files, dozens of them. Typed transcripts from board meetings, spreadsheets tracking budget cycles, JPEGs of rental slips, Excel sheets of deposits, a few short audio clips. I opened the spreadsheet first, rows of revenue entries, line item, dock access. Subheader, slip 2, slip 3, slip 4. Deposit date, May through August, year after year. The totals added up, thousands per summer. Then I checked the dock numbers against the 1986 consolidation plat. They matched. They were mine. My docks, my pilings, my shoreline, and their money. There were 3 audio files in the folder. The first one was labeled minutes_2021_springprep.mp3. I hit play. Background noise, a chair scraping, papers rustling, then her voice. Karen. He won't dig. He's just a seasonal. We've had access for years. They can't undo precedent. Laughter followed. Another voice asked, what if he does challenge it? Karen didn't hesitate. Then we escalate. We make it expensive. No one objected. No one pushed back. They all knew exactly what they were doing, and now I did too. I spent the next hour reviewing every entry. The dock rentals weren't occasional. They were consistent, structured, repeat renters. Names redacted or replaced with lot numbers, but the dates lined up with HOA meeting minutes that discussed slip assignments and budget increases from shoreline programs. The income from my docks, my property, had been padding their operating budget for at least 5 years. I forwarded the folder to Daniel, marked urgent. His reply came in less than an hour. This isn't a dispute. This is civil fraud. We'll add it to the complaint. Short, direct. But it confirmed what I already felt. Karen hadn't bent a rule. She'd built a system on theft. I printed everything, not just the revenue sheets, but the board emails, the recorded minutes, the dock lottery forms. I laid them out on the dining table in rows, labeled them with sticky notes, drew lines connecting rental periods to HOA statements, noted each time Karen had referenced community dock access in public, while privately approving unauthorized leases. This wasn't negligence, it wasn't confusion, it was quiet, intentional policy, backed by silence, buried in procedure. She didn't just misuse her authority, she monetized it, and she did it on my land. That night, I wrote a letter, addressed not to Karen, but to the full HOA board. It wasn't angry, it wasn't accusatory, it was clinical. I attached the evidence, screenshots, ledger lines, excerpts from the audio. I requested a public vote, immediate emergency session to review dock ownership records and suspend all HOA claims over structures, identified as deeded property under Parcel 487L. No threats, no legal jargon, just facts. Paper on paper. But I knew what it was. To Karen, it would read like a declaration. To me, it was something quieter. Not war, not yet. Just a refusal to be silent. The cease and desist wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, it was paper, measured, notarized, restrained. But every word carried weight. Daniel had spent 2 days shaping the language. Not a word wasted, not a threat overstepped. He printed 3 copies, one for the HOA, one for the county, one for the complaint file we were building. The first paragraph laid the ground. This letter serves as formal notice that Ridgewater Lakeside HOA is engaging in unauthorized use and misrepresentation of private shoreline assets, deeded under Parcel 487L. It cited the 1986 consolidation, the riparian control rights confirmed by Emily Storrs. It included 3 images, the county plat map, a dock photo labeled Slip 3, and a screenshot of the HOA's rental page. Each was dated, labeled, verified. The final paragraph made it clear. Any continued use, signage, or representation of ownership over the aforementioned docks will be interpreted as intentional infringement. Future legal action will proceed without further warning. Daniel signed it. I did too. We filed it by certified mail and hand-delivered a copy to the county clerk. There was no room left for interpretation, only response. The response came the next morning, not as a call, not even directly to me. Karen sent an open letter to every HOA member, CCD, across a distribution list that hadn't been used in 6 months. Subject: misuse of property and disruption of community harmony. She didn't name me, but it didn't matter. She called me a temporary resident asserting permanent control, accused me of revoking access to traditionally shared resources, and framed my actions as a coordinated attempt to destabilize board authority. She included a grainy aerial photo of the cove, circled the docks in red, labeled them previously shared, slips now under restriction. The email closed with a signature line that read, Karen L., President, Ridgewater Lakeside. HOA no. Invitation for dialogue. No facts, just framing. Within the hour, my inbox lit up. Some replies were cold, clipped, not helpful. Why now? We've always used those docs. A few were forwarded by accident, private replies sent to the group chain. One said, he's bluffing, he won't sue. They were wrong, but they weren't supposed to know that yet. That night, the wind was still. At 1:14 a.m., my dock camera caught movement. Slow, deliberate. A hooded figure, gloved hands, no flashlight. They walked to the end of the pier, turned once as if looking back toward the house, then left. No vandalism, just presence. But the next morning, 2 of my truck's tires were slashed. Clean cuts. No treads, no note, no warning. Just rubber curling from the gravel like skin peeled from fruit. I replaced them myself. Didn't call the sheriff. Didn't file a report. Because this wasn't about proving anything to law enforcement. I already knew who sent the message, even if they didn't sign it. I sent a second letter to the board, attached the stills from the dock footage, the timestamp, a note about the tires, documented but unreported, The header read, "Escalation concerns, ongoing harassment tied to shoreline dispute. No response, no read, receipt." No reply from Karen. Not from the vice president, not from the community liaison. Silence. It was the first time I understood what they were really doing, not fighting, waiting, letting pressure pile up, letting costs rise, letting resolve fray. Karen wasn't building a legal case. She was betting on fatigue. She wanted me to burn out. I walked the property with a notepad and a carpenter's pencil, marked 3 spots. First, behind the dock railing, high enough for full visibility, low enough to stay hidden. Second, in the pine above the gravel drive, angled toward the slope. Third, inside the porch light housing, motion activated, encrypted, backed up wirelessly to a remote account I'd set up in town. I installed each camera myself. No one saw me do it. But they'd know soon enough, because I wasn't watching for vandalism anymore. I was watching for patterns. Just before dusk, I walked to the base of the slope. The grass was soft from recent rain. Roots pushed up from the edge of the old shoreline boundary. I carried one wooden stake, spray-painted white, no sign attached, no wording, just a marker, a line. I used a rubber mallet to drive it halfway into the earth, right where the 1986 survey said the easement began. I stood back, hands resting on my hips. No announcement, no flags, just presence. A line they didn't put there, one I was reclaiming, quietly, legally, permanently. The pavilion had always been just another structure to me, a place for summer potlucks and coolers of beer, not policy and pressure. But that Saturday, it felt like a stage, not for celebration, for confrontation. I parked early. The gravel was still wet from last night's rain. Pines stood tall above the roofline. The lake, visible behind the crowd of folding chairs, was silent. I carried my binder in one hand, carefully prepared, labeled, cross-referenced. Every page mattered now. Every copy. It was 8:43 when I arrived, meeting scheduled for 9. Karen's crew had already set up, name placards across the head table, microphones clipped to portable stands, a speaker unit wired to a generator, humming beneath a canvas table skirt. No one greeted me. No one had to. Their silence was shaped by recognition. I took a seat in the second row, middle chair, binder in my lap, palms flat. Residents trickled in. Couples, retirees, a few younger families with foldable wagons and collapsible chairs. Small talk floated between them like pollen. But when I looked up, their eyes fell elsewhere. It wasn't hostility, it was reluctance. No one wanted to pick a side before the wind shifted. At 9:01, Karen stepped up. Same slate gray blouse, same firm jaw. A clipboard rested near the mic, but she didn't read from it. Her voice was clear, practiced. "We meet today not in conflict, but in continuity. The continuity of values that have governed this community for decades." She referenced tradition, shared access, and the destabilizing effects of private grievance. She never said my name. She didn't need to. Her glances did it for her. 2 brief sweeps across the audience, pausing half a second too long in my direction. Some voices, however well documented, forget that communities aren't built on paperwork. They're built on trust. Nods followed, automatic, fearful, measured, and then she invited the floor to speak. If there are questions or comments, the board welcomes them. Her voice was warm, but her eyes said otherwise. I stood, not quickly, not dramatically, just purposefully. I introduced myself, first and last name, address, length of ownership. I didn't accuse, I explained. I returned this year after my uncle passed. I came back to a locked system that never asked for my consent. And I've spent the past 3 months documenting what was taken from that. Shoreline. Quietly and without right. I walked forward, binder open. Page by page, I passed out copies, county plat maps, the 1986 dock consolidation agreement, notarized parcel overlays. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't dramatize the narrative. I read. This is Slip B, currently marked by the HOA as communal. It's tied directly to my uncle's deed, consolidated under parcel 487L. Never revoked, never reassigned. The room was still. These docs were never shared. They were never yours to give away. A woman in the third row raised her hand. Wait, is that map current? Another followed. Has this been verified by the county? Karen stepped forward, slightly too fast. These records? They're outdated, irrelevant. Lot lines shift. Surveys. Her voice faltered. She looked at her board. No one moved. I lifted another sheet. Letter from the state-certified water rights consultant, dated 3 weeks ago. It confirms that riparian control of deeded docks cannot be transferred by community vote or assumed use. Then I played the clip. Just 14 seconds. Karen's voice clear in the audio. He won't dig. He's just a seasonal. We've had access for years. They can't undo precedent. The room changed. A neighbor behind me muttered, "She said that?" Someone to the left leaned forward. "Is this all real?" I didn't answer. The documents did that for me. Karen's lips parted. No words at first. She grabbed the mic. "This is manipulation. This is an ambush. These recordings were taken without board consent. This is harassment." Her voice cracked. "You think this makes you right? You're nothing but a disruptor, a vandal. You want to burn it all down." Someone near the back called out, "You rented those docks, didn't you?" Another voice. "How long has this been going on?" Karen's fists clenched at her sides. She stared at the board. No one rose to back her. She left. Not in silence, not with dignity. She stormed out, papers clutched in one hand, mic still live behind her, screeching in static. The board remained seated, frozen. No one followed her. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then an older man I didn't know stood and said simply, "I move that we suspend all enforcement related to dock access and usage until an independent review of deeds and county records is completed." Someone else seconded. The vote was called. Hands raised. Dozens of them. Only 2 abstained. Daniel, seated at the back corner, took quiet notes. He didn't look at me, didn't nod, just wrote. The motion passed. The meeting ended without applause, without resolution. But it ended with something more important. Recognition. I closed my binder. My hands didn't shake. I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt like I'd finally been heard. Not triumphant, just steady. Heard. Seen. Defended. The silence after the pavilion meeting didn't last long. Within 10 days, Daniel called. "You're not going to believe who reached out." He didn't say it with excitement, just clarity. The kind you get when things stop slipping and finally catch traction. The state attorney's office had been contacted, by whom we didn't know. Probably someone in the audience that day, maybe more than one. Karen had made enemies in her quiet way, and the evidence was finally loud enough for someone to listen. An official complaint had been filed. It cited everything: rental income on misappropriated property, manipulation of dock boundaries, procedural opacity by the HOA board, fraud, if proven, abuse of nonprofit authority at minimum. Daniel forwarded me a scanned letter from the Office of Property Compliance Review. A preliminary case file has been opened regarding shoreline parcel 487L and the Ridgewater HOA. Compliance audit to be conducted. Board cooperation is expected. For once, I wasn't the one pushing paper uphill. They were. It happened on a Thursday morning. No notice. No HOA emails, no signs. Just a white utility truck and 2 surveyors in green jackets, walking the ridge trail with ledger books and tripods. One carried a rolled copy of the original plat, laminated at the edges. The other adjusted a site level between the trunks. I walked down to meet them. No handshakes, just verification. I guided them to the pilings, each one still marked by the faint remains of stamped brass discs my uncle had sunk decades ago. They took measurements, compared ledger notes, nodded. "These line up with the 1986 filings," one of them said. "Clean match." They didn't stay long, didn't need to. Truth doesn't argue. It just waits to be found again. Word spread faster than I expected. Walter, the vet from the far bend, told me he saw the delivery happen. A plainclothes court officer, a manila envelope, no ceremony, just process. Karen didn't show her face for 3 days. Her SUV stayed parked beneath the carport, curtains drawn, porch plants wilting in the heat. Then, without explanation, a small laminated notice appeared on the HOA bulletin board by the mail hut. Effective immediately, HOA President Karen, redacted, is on leave pending legal review. Questions may be directed to interim board chair, Julia Fenton. No mention of why, no offer of updates, just absence. She didn't go quietly, though. A week later, Daniel called again. "She's suing you." He didn't sound surprised. The countersuit was thin. Claims of harassment. Allegations that I'd interfered with HOA-held property. A paragraph about how my public disclosure at the pavilion meeting had caused reputational harm. Daniel submitted the full record in reply. Deeds, maps, certified letters, and Emily Store's water rights affidavit. The judge reviewed it within a week, didn't even call for hearing. The dismissal was 1 page long, simple. Private ownership confirmed, no standing to claim public access. Karen's last official move vanished with a clerk's stamp. Pressure makes boards bend. The remaining members called an emergency session, this time announced, this time with minutes. They voted to freeze all shoreline enforcement, all fines suspended, all citations nullified. A third-party HOA management firm was contracted to audit and revise their internal policies. For the first time in memory, the HOA website's Community Shoreline Access Map page redirected to a 404. Daniel forwarded me a copy of the board resolution. The association recognizes the need to reestablish member trust through independent oversight. Enforcement authority concerning disputed shoreline parcels shall be considered void until formal reauthorization. It wasn't accountability, but it was enough to start drawing the lines where they should have been all along. The envelope arrived a few days later. Certified mail. HOA. Return address. Inside, 1 page, no emotion, no preamble. The board acknowledges the parcel known as 487L retains full legal ownership of all dock structures as described. In county filings, future access will be restricted per owner discretion. The association disclaims prior rental activity involving said structures as a misunderstanding of jurisdiction. That was it. No apology, no reparation, no sentence beginning with, "We were wrong." But it was acknowledgment, on paper, sealed, recorded. Sometimes justice doesn't come with apology. Sometimes it comes with the quiet weight of a certified letter, signed at the bottom by people who used to pretend you didn't matter. I placed the page beside the original deed. The water outside didn't look any different, but I saw it clearly now. And so did they. The fall newsletter arrived folded in half, caught between coupon sheets and a community recycling update. It smelled faintly of toner and eucalyptus, probably from the landscaping insert. I almost missed it. The sentence was tucked between a pruning reminder and the date for bulk waste drop-off. President Karen, last name, has submitted her resignation effective immediately. That was it. No context, no summary of the investigation. Not even a thank you, just a clean extraction, like she'd never been there. There was no formal statement, no farewell email, no invitation for transition or tribute. Her name vanished from the contact list. Her number removed from the board directory. The link to her profile on the HOA site now led to a blank page. No apology. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just absence. It was the same tactic she'd used for years. Avoid confrontation. Control perception. Only now it was turned on her. A week later, I walked down to the pavilion for the first open forum held under the interim board. I didn't dress up. Didn't prepare statements. I sat in the last row, binder closed. The new board chair, a man named Jonathan Pike, opened the meeting with a shaky voice and open hands. "We want to begin restoring trust. That starts here, with transparency and process." They spoke in broad strokes, reviewing procedures, welcoming input, building a governance committee. I could hear the hesitation behind their words, fear too. These weren't people trying to consolidate power. They were trying to survive its aftermath. No one mentioned Karen. They didn't need to. Her shadow still sat in the empty chair near the head table. 3 days after the forum, a new email from the HOA arrived. Subject line, parcel status clarification. I opened it slowly. My chest tightened, not with fear, but something close to closure. The Ridgewater Lakeside Homeowners Association formally recognizes the parcel boundaries and dock ownership established under County Plat number C-1287, recorded in 1986. No communal claims remain active over these structures. I start before the sun clears the trees. No truck, no contractor, no noise beyond what my own hands make. The dock looks worse in morning light. Boards cupped from years of damp. Nail heads pushed up like old scars. Railings gray and soft where too many hands leaned. Too many strangers tied off boats that were never supposed to be there. I set the tools out on the porch table the same way every day. Tape measure, chalk line, circular saw, box of galvanized screws. New cedar stacked shoulder high against the railing. The smell of fresh wood cuts through the lake air. Clean, sharp, honest. I pry the first plank loose slowly. The old nails complain on the way out. Rust flakes onto the boards below like red dust. I don't rush it. There's no reason to. Every piece that comes up tells a story. Here's one split down the middle where a rental cleat must have been over-tightened. Here's another with black marks from someone dragging a cooler across it. One still has a faint stencil. HOA, slip 3. I flip that one into the scrap pile without comment. Measure twice. Cut once. My uncle used to say that when we fixed fence posts. I still hear it when the saw spins up. The new cedar slides into place clean and square. I drive the screws down slow until the heads sit flush. No wobble, no gaps. It feels less like construction and more like correction. Not building something new, restoring the shape of what was already here. A few times I catch movement across the cove. Curtains shift, someone stepping out with coffee, a car door shutting. They're watching. That's fine. Let them see. Let them watch me keep what's mine. Around mid-morning, I hear gravel. Not the cautious kind, just ordinary steps. I turn and see the man from 2 lots down, the one who barely opened his door the first time I knocked months ago. He doesn't come all the way to the dock, just stops near the path, holds out a coiled bundle of rope, thick marine line, still clean. Had extra, he says. For mooring, I nod. Appreciate it. Neither of us explains what we mean. He sets it on the railing and leaves the way he came. No speech, no apology, just rope. It's enough. Later, a woman trimming hedges across the water raises her hand when she notices me working. Not a big wave, just 2 fingers lifted off the clippers. Recognition, like we're both admitting something without saying it. In the afternoon, I find an envelope tucked under a rock on the porch step. No name on the front. Inside, a small square of paper, torn from a notebook. Glad you stood up. Didn't know we still could. No signature. I fold it once, then again. Inside the kitchen, I open the drawer beneath the counter, the one where I keep the old survey letter from 1989, sealed in plastic. I place the note beside it, paper next to paper, proof next to proof. Different kinds, both important. The routine settles, in without me deciding on it. Every morning, same time, same path. Coffee first, black. Nothing added, then boots, then the walk down the slope. The ground is firmer now, less churned. Grass starting to reclaim the places where too many people used to pass through. I step past the wooden stake I drove into the soil weeks ago. Still straight, still where the survey says the line begins. No one's touched it. I like that. I follow the boards out to the end of the dock. Always the end. That's where the lake opens up. Fog sits low some mornings, lifting slow like breath leaving glass. Other days it's bright and flat, sunlight skating across the surface. The lake changes every day, color, texture, sound, but the lines don't. Not anymore. I know exactly where my boundary runs now. I can feel it without looking. From that pine near the bend, across the old piling, through the center of Dock C, out to the waterline, fixed, recorded, real. I stand, there until the coffee cools. No thinking, just looking, letting the quiet do its work. I never put up signs, never hang a chain, never stencil warnings on the rails. No private property, no trespassing, no flags. I don't need them. Ownership doesn't shout. It stands. It's in the way the boards are straight, the way the hardware matches, the way someone walking down the slope can tell, without reading anything, that this place is looked after. Care is louder than threats. If someone asks, I'll answer. If someone wanders too far, I'll talk to them. But I'm not pacing the shoreline like a guard. I'm not waiting for headlights at midnight. I'm not collecting proof anymore. That part's done. The fight already happened. Paper handled it. The rest is just living. Across the lake, The old shared access sign near another dock disappears one day. Just gone. No replacement, no explanation. Things are correcting themselves, quietly, the way they should have from the start. Near sunset, I sit at the very end of Dock A, boots resting on the new cedar, solid under my weight, no flex. The water taps gently against the pilings. Same sound I remember from being a kid, dangling my feet while my uncle fixed a motor behind me. I think about the gate, the laminated notices, the fines printed like threats, the nights I sat in the dark watching shadows cross boards that didn't belong to them. There were moments, more than I like to admit, when walking away felt easier. Sell it, leave, let the paperwork become someone else's problem. They were counting on that. Fatigue, silence, people deciding it wasn't worth the trouble. They almost had me there. Almost. All it would have taken was one tired decision, one quiet surrender, and the shoreline would have shifted on a map somewhere. My name erased, history rewritten, no one noticing. But I stayed, didn't yell, didn't make speeches, just kept pulling records, kept showing up, kept standing where the line actually was. That's all it took. The lake moves the same as it always has, wind, ripples, light breaking apart on the surface. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just steady. Like it doesn't care who owns what, and maybe it doesn't. But I do, because this isn't about winning. It's about not being erased. I lean back on my hands and look down the length of the dock. Straight boards, clean edges, no foreign signs, no borrowed locks, just wood, water, quiet, what was almost taken, what still remains. I breathe in the smell of cedar and lake air. The waterline sits exactly where it's supposed to be, and it holds.